Theories and Principles, an overview of second language learning and teaching by Heather Woodward. My area of specialization is second language learning and teaching in English as a foreign language contexts. EFL refers to the teaching and learning of English in contexts where English is not the official language of the country. My research question is, what are prevalent theories, models, and frameworks of language, language teaching, and language learning that have influenced L2 instruction? Frequent theories and hypotheses of language learning are as follows: comprehensible input, comprehensible output, noticing, input processing, skill acquisition, and sociocultural theory. Most second language researchers adopt a cognitivist perspective, drawing on hypotheses that emphasize internal mental processes. Cognitivist research is typically quantitative in nature and often employs quasi-experimental designs conducted either in classroom settings or controlled laboratory environments, usually with sample sizes ranging from 20 to 50 participants. In contrast, researchers working within the sociocultural framework tend to use qualitative methodologies, such as case studies, to explore language development in contextually rich real-world settings. I briefly explain these theories and hypotheses and discuss their disadvantages. Krashen's 1982 Comprehensible Input Hypothesis states that language acquisition occurs when learners are exposed to input that is slightly beyond their current level of competence. Swain's 1985 Comprehensible Output Hypothesis states that producing language pushes learners to process language more deeply, facilitating language development in ways that input alone cannot. There are 6 recognized functions of output: notice knowledge gaps, reflect on language use, test hypotheses, develop fluency, hone discourse, and express personal voice. Schmidt contended that conscious awareness is a necessary condition for language learning, particularly in adult learners. His hypothesis emerged from a case study of Wes, an adult learner of English who developed fluency but failed to acquire certain grammatical structures. Schmidt concluded that because Wes never noticed these forms in the input, they were never internalized despite frequent exposure. Long's 1996 interaction hypothesis states that conversational interaction facilitates development when learners have opportunities to negotiate meaning. Negotiation of meaning is when communication breaks down and learners either receive clarification requests or ask for clarification. Long argued that interaction plays a role in making input comprehensible, which develops second language. Ann Patton's 1996 input processing theory was developed to explain how learners convert comprehensible input into intake. Van Patten added a cognitive dimension to input-based theories by explaining how learners allocate attention during real-time language processing. He proposed that learners follow predictable processing strategies, such as focusing on content words before grammatical forms. These tendencies explain why certain grammatical features are often overlooked unless they are explicitly taught or noticed. One additional issue not addressed involves how learners develop fluency. Fluency involves the automatic use of language with minimal cognitive effort, allowing learners to communicate effectively in real-world contexts. In the early stages, learners often produce language that is slow, hesitant, and effortful. Anderson and later De Keyser proposed that fluency emerges as learners move from declarative knowledge, which is the conscious understanding of rules, to procedural knowledge, which is the knowledge of how to use the rules. Through practice and repetition, procedural knowledge becomes automatic. Critics contended that cognitive theories and hypotheses overlook the reality of learners' individual differences, Additionally, they stated that cognitive perspectives tend to overemphasize internal mental processes while underrepresenting the social and cultural contexts. The sociocultural view of language learning emphasizes that language is acquired through social interaction and cultural participation. Rooted in Vygotsky's theory, Lantoff argued that learning occurs first on a social level, through interaction with others before becoming internalized by the individual. Important concepts include the zone of proximal development, whereby learners develop language best when supported by more knowledgeable others, and scaffolding, which refers to the support provided during learning tasks. Some disadvantages of sociocultural theory include its limited explanatory power compared to cognitivism, ambiguity in how to measure and evaluate language development, and its underrepresentation in second language acquisition research. From a pedagogical standpoint, effective instruction should draw from both cognitive insights and sociocultural understanding, acknowledging that language learning is both an internal and social process. In this section, I focus on the types of articles reviewed, the central research topics explored, and the key findings reported. The articles I reviewed include systematic literature reviews, meta-analyses, quasi-experimental studies, and case studies. The research topics commonly addressed include communication models, communicative conditions, and the effectiveness of explicit versus implicit feedback and instruction. The following are some of the key findings reported in these studies. During the 1950s and 60s, language learners reported difficulty in applying what they learned in the classroom to real-world situations. Researchers attributed this gap to instructional activities that did not mirror authentic communicative conditions. Researchers found that designing activities to replicate the conditions of real-world communication helps to close this gap. To solve this problem, Ellis and Shintani outlined 4 conditions that would replicate real-world demands. Classroom tasks need to involve an information or knowledge gap, lead to a non-linguistic outcome, prioritize meaning over form, and require learners to draw on their own linguistic resources to convey messages. These conditions help simulate authentic language use. For example, asking learners to plan a 2-week holiday with one of their classmates and present their travel itinerary to the class. Hymes introduced the concept of communicative competence, emphasizing that language ability involves not only grammatical accuracy, but also its appropriate use in sociocultural contexts. The most famous model by Canali and Swain, later refined by Canali, outlines 4 key components: grammatical competence, which is the knowledge of vocabulary, syntax, and phonology; sociolinguistic competence, which is the appropriate language use across social and cultural settings; discourse competence, which is the ability to link ideas cohesively in speech and writing; and strategic competence, which is the use of strategies to manage communication breakdowns. This framework is important to second language teaching, where the ultimate goal is not just accuracy, but communicative ability. Later models of communicative competence became increasingly complex, offering more nuanced understandings. While this development enriches our grasp of communicative ability, the complexity can pose challenges for teachers, as it might be difficult to translate into classroom strategies. Paul Nation's 4 strands model offers a framework for language instruction. Learners spend equal amounts of time on 4 activity types: meaning-focused input, meaning-focused output, language-focused learning, and fluency. Meaning-focused input involves listening and reading with the primary goal of understanding. Texts should be mostly familiar, containing 95 to 98% known vocabulary. Examples include extensive reading and listening to stories. Meaning-focused output refers to speaking and writing tasks aimed at communication, such as personal writing, interviews, or role plays. Language-focused learning includes the deliberate study of form, vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation through explicit instruction and noticing activities. Fluency development emphasizes practicing familiar language with the aim of increasing speed and ease, often through repeated, time-constrained tasks. Nation's Four Strands model is based on both second language acquisition theories and research. The meaning-focused input strand draws on Krashen's comprehensible input hypothesis, which emphasizes the importance of understandable input in developing language ability. Nation also researched extensive reading programs that show how large amounts of meaningful input can improve learners' overall proficiency. The meaning-focused output strand builds on Swain's comprehensible output hypothesis. This theory suggests that when learners try to speak or write, they notice what they don't yet know and push themselves to express ideas more accurately. Swain's research highlights how producing language, especially in meaningful situations, can help learners refine their skills. When input and output are combined, learners often negotiate meaning, which is supported by Long's interaction hypothesis. This process helps learners adjust their language in real time, improving both understanding and use. The language-focused learning strand has been widely studied and is supported by theories like Van Patten's input processing theory and Schmidt's noticing hypothesis. These suggest that some features of language, especially those that are less obvious, won't be learned unless learners pay close attention to them. Norris and Ortega's meta-analysis strengthens this idea by showing that explicit instruction, especially with practice, leads to better learning than just picking things up incidentally. Ellis also points out that focusing on language is most effective when it's part of meaningful communication, not isolated drills. The final strand is fluency development, which is supported by skill acquisition theory. This theory says that language, like any skill, moves from knowing about it to using it automatically through repeated and meaningful practice. Studies on activities like 4-3-2 speaking tasks and repeated performances show that fluency increases when learners practice using familiar language under time pressure. Moving forward, I plan to focus on individual differences. One ongoing challenge is translating all these broad theories and findings into practical strategies that actually match the needs of different learners. Thank you for listening. Here are the references that I used for this presentation. I look forward to any recommendations and suggestions.